All right, we are live. So summertime is meant to be a slowdown. It ain't in 2020, 2021 is the year that I'm trying to say. Who knows? It's hard to read between 2020 and 2021. Summertime slowdown is done. We're hearing from CEOs and hiring managers that is as chaotic as they've ever seen it. So today on Culture Builder Live, we'll be talking through some trends with my dear colleague, Carrie Bucci. Welcome to Culture Builder Live. Hey, I am Chris Wink. I am the CEO and co-founder of Technically. We are doing a LinkedIn Live for the first time. Spoiler, this is secretly just a test. But, you know, there's no better way to test than with Ms. Carrie Bucci. What up, Carrie Bucci, VP of Product at Technically. Pleasure to be with you.
Good morning, Chris. Great to see
you. Good morning. So, though this might be a test of LinkedIn Live, Culture Builder Live is quite a real thing, and our ongoing conversations about trends we're hearing in the hiring and team building marketplace are also quite real. So whether or not you're watching this live, the content is vibrant. So a couple of things we wanted to run through, Carrie, over on Culture Builder newsletter, something that I write weekly, trends that I'm hearing in interviews with CEOs and hiring managers and team builders. I kind of want to run through a couple of them with you because you and I actually have not synced on a few of these. And I'm wondering, in your orbit, hanging out with the kind of HR world, how much this feels quite real or not. So let's start with one of the biggest ones of 2021, the Great Resignation. Indeed. Great Resignation. Is this just a well-written tweet that went too far and is a little bit hype and nonsense, or is there something real here? Are the webinars just capturing a moment, or is this real? Great Resignation, real or fake?
Well, first of all, my thought when I hear the term the Great Resignation, the first thing I think of is like, wow, whoever came up with that, brilliant. Like, what? I mean, like,
and we do know. We do know this. Yeah, someone. I'm gonna forget the gentleman's name. I will pull this up because we should shout him out. He does not get its credit. But yes, this was a social message that went a little crazy. So it does have origins, and we know the origins. But yes,
yeah,
I'll do my proper reporting.
That's what comes up for me every time. I'm like, wow, great branding. I think that must like harken back to my advertising and agency days. But yeah. It's interesting because this came up in a conversation I was having recently with a hiring manager from a Philadelphia area tech company. And he suggested that the Great Resignation is kind of like it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors, that he hasn't really been seeing that within his organization. And I have, I'm doing, as you know, a series of HR hangs with our HR, people ops, and talent acquisition friends. And tomorrow's topic is actually the Great Resignation. So you're gonna have a lot more insight and data coming out of that conversation tomorrow. But from what I'm hearing, hiring is bonkers, but they're not seeing the turnover that they thought they would. So the hiring needs existed before people are seeing an exit anyway. I don't have any data, personal or anecdotal, that points to the Great Resignation happening and people are exiting in droves. I'm just not seeing it.
And we can shout out. So it's Anthony Klotz, management professor. He's at Texas A&M. So shout out Anthony Klotz. Yeah, I wanted to make sure Anthony got a shout out. So we will make sure to plug that in the notes. And yeah, the origins of that is a relatively large management survey that put 2 in 5 professionals reported that they were considering a move, which was one of the highest that's been seen. The logic, of course, post-pandemic, you have a mix of just, sure, pent-up demand. You have natural turnover, and some folks maybe didn't make that move for 15 months during a pandemic. So just normal turnover is backlogged. And you had this buildup of burnout, drain. Maybe folks watched the company not handle a stressful time very well and wanted to move on. The remote juggle and the like, that's all emotion. And Carrie, I'll say that in CEO conversations I'm having, some are feeling it, but when a movement gets a name like the Great Resignation, it does start. You can start saying, well, anyone who left, I feel it's like that. It's a stressful time. We don't yet, as you're saying, the quit rate was real high for a few months. And that might be in itself the definition of the Great Resignation. We did have a height in quits. How long that sustains, that was probably the question about whether it's a momentous time or a brief window. So, all right, noted. Let's go to the next. I'm interested in the movement on defining oneself as remote only, remote first, remote flexible. We're seeing companies across this bandwidth, companies that are saying, some in-office culture will remain. Of course, we're seeing lots, particularly in growth stage, are just throwing the rule book out the window and saying we're entirely remote. A theme that I was hearing in conversations was the mold is going to get set by Labor Day. So summertime, people are feeling out. How are we using the office? How much is it real or not? This is playland, and then things get set. But we're also seeing Delta variant show up and some pandemic rollouts. A couple of the jurisdictions we report on and technically have added back mask recommendations indoors. That might change office environments, even for the vaccinated. Curious, in your conversations, Gary, did folks already decide where they're going to be in terms of their office usage and it's done? Or is this still in flux as we watch behaviors change?
I am hearing from our HR and talent friends that it is in flux. So from the conversations I've had, a lot of folks are really moving to that hybrid model. So maybe, 2 or 3 days a week in the office, the remainder from home. That seems to be kind of the standard, but nothing is set in stone. So to your point, summertime is a great test. Those who feel comfortable I think are trying that out. It feels good to get out of the house again. It feels good to come to the office, and within our organization, we're trying something similar, and it feels like we're all ready to do it. But to your point about the Delta variant, even being on the train last week felt different than a couple of weeks ago. So people are still proceeding with caution. Everyone really, I think, wants to figure out, I don't want to say what the new normal looks like, because what is normal anyway? What's normal ever been? But I do think that, as humans, we crave structure, and we want to know what to expect. That's, how we stave off anxiety. And right now, I think the hybrid model, a few days of work a week in the office, few at home, that's what people are going with, and unless something radically changes.
And the data, at least the surveying, we all know that surveying is what people respond to in a moment. That can keep changing, but that has been somewhat steady. 2/3 to as high as 3/4 of professionals want some office time. So the shakeout looks like you can end up with 20% of companies in our knowledge worker segment might be remote or remote first. They might have an office, but might really prefer remote culture, and that would be a big jump. But it would remain a minority of firms and professionals. So it could be a big leap, but still showing around that 2/3 number of even employees wanting some office time. So I'm talking to a bunch of CEOs that are skittish about this. Do I have to go fully remote for full recruiting? And look, there is a portion of the employer base that, when surveyed, say they are taking or willing to take pay cuts for fully remote environments, or at least are, pursuing remote above all else. So it is an opportunity if that's a professional segment you want to approach. It just ain't most in the surveying, and I think that's something that we keep coming back to. Carrie, and let me turn to another topic here. The changing relationship of employer and employee, and perhaps even more diving into the candidate experience, as we so often call it. Post-pandemic, a lot of stress. We've been tracking for years the rise of the one-click apply job platforms that make it easier and easier and easier to do volume-based applying. Doesn't necessarily equate with quality. Two trends that I am fascinated by, that I am required to say as a journalist, are not major trends yet, but are at least interesting examples. The rise of job candidates ghosting, like employers have long done, hey, I just stopped responding to your emails, even though you thought I was a finalist. That did, according to an Indeed survey, spike in 2020 and has continued somewhat in 2021. So hiring managers, you're not crazy if you're feeling that more people are just straight out ghosting you. We wrote a story on with a couple of CEOs who just like they had a signed offer letter and the candidate just never showed, and that did spike in 2020-21. Still a minority. We're talking like 1 in 10 at most. This is still a minority, but it popped up. And another fascinating one that we've done some reporting on is, and this is just like a boogeyman for every hiring manager ever. Candidates who have taken 2 W-2s without disclosing to their employees in fully remote environments. They've managed 2 full-time jobs at the same time. We did some reporting on this. I sent a newsletter about this, and I heard from about a half dozen more employers. They said they've been burned by this. This is not widespread. Please do not call me alarmist. But Carrie, my question here with these examples are, do you think we've had a permanent change in the employer, job seeker, employee relationship? Is this just fry and the job candidate is doing what employers have done to many job candidates through the years? Permanent change, or just, to use Jay Powell's word, transitory in this moment?
I vote transitory.
Wow. Okay. Bold.
Yes. Well, you know me, Chris. I'm a pretty bold woman.
Yeah.
I think weird things happen when it's a candidate's market. This is the latest weird thing to happen. I have not had any conversations with folks who have personally experienced this, other than the fact I know somebody who has had 2 jobs at the same time without disclosing to their employer.
Fascinating.
Yes. The first thought that comes into my head with this is like, who the hell does this? And also, what kind of organization is so lax that they don't notice that somebody else is working a full-time job? So I think at the heart of it, it's a management problem when that happens. Luckily, it's not something that is widespread. As you mentioned, it's not something we're seeing across the board. But I do think that right now the power balance has shifted. It's the candidate's time to shine. And as you mentioned before, there has been a version of this ghosting or kind of the long pauses in the hiring conversations that have been happening on the employer side for a long time. The hiring process is fundamentally broken in most places. Some places really, really get it right. They have, they know exactly what they're looking for in a candidate. They have a firm process down. They've got a team that's engaged. They're asking the right questions. They're ready to hire. For all others, the hiring process and the interview process is really, really frustrating to the candidates. So it makes sense that in some respect, we're seeing the tables turn because it is a candidate marketplace. That said, like, come on, folks, let's be decent human beings. Let's be grown-up professionals here. It's not cool to ghost anybody. I don't care what the situation is. So yeah, another bold statement. Come on, folks, get your act together.
We're gonna do the Carrie Bucci. This really grinds my gears segment. That's a natural opportunity. I'm Carrie Bucci, and what really grinds my gears. We do it. All right, that is it. That's our little touch on summertime trends. We'll be doing more of this with Carrie Bucci, and Culture Builder Live will be fully back with a weekly format, hopefully on LinkedIn Live if we can get our logistics down. Thanks so much. We'll do a recap on Technically as always. Carrie Bucci, VP of Product at Technically, Chris Wink at CEO of Technically. We love growing our community of technology professionals and helping you meet and engage that community. Drop comments and follow up if you have any questions. We'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody. See ya.